HR, there's already stuff happening now. And I think if you're an HR professional and you're not conscious of these things or you're not aware of these things, everything we're going to talk about will be affected by what I'd see two very, very big trends. Melvin introduced me earlier. I just want to, add to that. So I run several companies, several startups. One is a big data company called Zerolytics. I'm also the CEO of a staffing company, PeopleLink. So we do job fairs, everything via digital. I'm also a co-founder of a fintech company called Uploan. We do salary loans. So I'm kind of like in the intersection of HR and technology. My background is data management and risk management. So I spent the majority of my career, 14 years in banking, and then the next 6 years working in IT. And part of that also working for BPOs. No? And I think BPOs are one of the most interesting, I would say, experiments from an HR perspective that we've seen in the last few years. So I'll be sharing a little bit about that later. And I also do digital and HR analytics training for several institutions. So I kind of am a practitioner in this space already by virtue of all the training we've conducted and from personal experience. So the topics we're going to talk about today are very close to my heart. And I've also been a manager myself, so almost 20 years managing teams. The largest team I've managed had 150 people. Yeah, the slides will be made available after the webinar to Catherine, who just asked the question. So I'm just going to jump right to it. Instead of going topic by topic, I think we'd rather talk about two really big themes that cut across all the topics that you want to learn about. And I think these are the two biggest trends that will affect HR in the next 2 years, as in 2 years, as in next year, as in right now. And we have to face it, take the bull by the horns and figure out what to do. The first is called the gig economy. Generally speaking, people are already shifting their work attitudes from traditional employment to freelancing. We've seen this happen before. If you've been in HR for longer than 10 years, this happened also in the 90s. When Ramos was president, so a lot of economic growth and the birth of the internet industry. Lots of freelancers happened during that time, and I think it's happening now. And then the second, everyone's heard about AI and robotic process automation. What does that mean for us, especially in BPOs? But I don't think BPOs are the only ones that will be affected, so I'll talk about that. So pretty tight, packed topics. Everything you wanted to learn in the syllabus will be covered by these two topics, but I think it's better that we formatted it this way. They take it from a thematic perspective. By the way, anytime you just raise your hand if you have a question, I'm monitoring the question bar para real time, no? Okay, first we'll talk about the gig economy. What's the gig economy? I think it was McKinsey in 2016 that brought this up, but actually it's been around for a while. Gig economy is freelancing. But I think we're seeing the confluence of several, not just social change, but also technology change that's making it more possible. Basically, the emergence of digital platforms make it easier for people to find work online. And it's really, really easy. Later, I'll show you a couple of those platforms, which rather than just looking at it from freelancing, maybe we can figure out as HR practitioners if we can leverage those platforms for our own companies. The statistic, varies. I also have my own internal statistic, but globally, I think Ipsos brought this up. Roughly 18% of the working age population is considering or is already doing some form of gig work. And that's really a massive statistic. That's 1 out of 5 people. I think locally, it's lower than that, maybe closer to 10, but based on more first-hand experience, I have some numbers to share. I think the numbers are growing quite rapidly, and we have to figure out as HR, if we're still in traditional type of institutions, how do we make, take advantage or leverage this for our companies and as professionals. So Gig economy is basically what we call the Hollywood model. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hollywood model. If you know any big blockbuster movie, or any indie movie for that matter, uh, they haven't really been done as monolithic projects. Now, when I say monolithic projects, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, big studios would bankroll an entire movie, and they would have directors on the staff, they'd have actors on the staff. Parang yung panahon ni na Dolphy, ni na Nora, ni na Nita Blanca, they all work for one studio. But now, producers are the only ones who work in the studio. Everyone else is a freelancer. So if a producer gets a project usually pitched by a director and a screenwriter, they'll green light it, and then they'll hire some agents to grab some actors and promote the film. And then when the film is done, you go to an executive producer to market it. So any movie nowadays is really a freelance project. And then when the movie is done, everyone gets their piece of the pie, and then they break up, and then they do the next project. But you do notice some commonalities in terms of the people that certain people like to work with. Like if you are familiar with Christopher Nolan, he tends to work with the kinds of actors. You see the Star Wars set of movies, it's the same bunch of people, the Star Trek set of movies. So you can see that rather than it being studio centric, it's actually freelancer centric. So, and Hollywood's been doing this for decades, almost a century. And little by little, I think this kind of model is starting to penetrate other forms of work or other industries. So why is this happening? And as I said, this happened much earlier in the local industry. I remember in the 90s, you actually still had, let's say, web development. Web developers used to be on the payroll. And then now, it's very rare that you have a web developer on the payroll. You will always freelance that kind of gig. No? And I think it's because the rise of the economy is always always a contributor. Every time the economy gets better, and it got better during Ramos's era, coming from Cory and Marcos, there's suddenly an abundance of work and not enough people to do it formally. So freelancers pop up. I think that's the same thing happening now. We had good economic growth from Pinoy's time, and knock on wood, current administration doesn't seem to be wrecking the economy yet. But we're also having a lot of factors contributing to it. Number one is the traffic. People don't know what to do with the traffic anymore. It's an average of 3 to 4 hours every day. And that's 2 months of your year sitting in a car. And that's really bad, no? Just play this again. Can you see my screen? Ano nangyari dito? Ba't ayaw naman siya? Okay, I think that's better. After traffic, job dissatisfaction generally is a trend. More and more younger people, I would say, millennials and Generation Z, and then soon we'll see Generation Alpha. They generally were raised, I'm making generalizations here, so no offense to the people who are actually millennials, but I think the trend is observed worldwide. People who grew up in healthy economic environments, they value job security less compared to people like me. I'm Gen X. I grew up in a period of economic instability. I tend to value tenure. I tend to value job security. So I don't, job hop. Only recently, and now I'm running my own company. But generally, young people, they don't really see job security as a big deal. If they don't like to work, they leave. And then now we have lots of other jobs that are quite modular, easy to get in, easy to get out, like BPOs. So they also tend to be quite vocal, quite emotional, and social media aggravates this. So again, I'm just making generalizations, but this is a general social norm, and that's what's also led to the rise of freelancing, because the easier it is to find work online, the less people tend to stick around. Even the usual, oh, if you're 5 years in your job, you get retirement, that's not as attractive as it used to be. It was attractive in my era, like 20 years ago. Nowadays, people don't care. No? And then the third factor is the rise of digital platforms. And this is what I think is the linchpin. Even if you did want to find a job back in the day, it was very hard. Your option was classified ads, then later it was forums, and then later it was Job Street. Now you have lots of platforms, very easy to find jobs, very easy to farm out work. And these are things we need to understand as HR professionals. So I'll give an example. I work in the analytics field, and analytics is a type of work that requires the cooperation of multiple roles. Similar phenomena in supply chain management, similar phenomena in manufacturing, similar phenomena in publishing. So this can be a good analogy. So in analytics, everyone thinks about data scientists, but actually they're just at the end of the chain. We need the cooperation of IT people to produce data, IT people to publish it in a warehouse, and then that's when the analyst comes in. Analyst prepares the reports, and then the managers will create decisions. So this is a typical department or job family, you can call it that. But what I'm seeing now as both an HR and an analytics professional is the first 3 jobs you can outsource, because it's now possible to do data extraction on the cloud, data warehousing on the cloud. You can also instantly share analytics via digital platforms. So essentially, if you're a company and you want to get data managed, you don't have to hire that many people anymore. Some companies still do, but it is in theory possible to do completely outsourced. And then you have KPOs that are also doing this for other companies. And then that leaves the latter part. If if you have people already doing the data crunching for you and doing all the menial work, you just get the report and then interpret it. But actually, that other half naman, I think, will be prone to another issue, which is automation, which I'll talk in the latter half of my presentation. So this is why I think gig economy and AI are the existential issues for HR today, because this has the opportunity to disrupt and really change the way we're managing companies. It won't destroy HR, we just have to change the way we're managing our human resource. So the more freelancers there are and the more automation there is, basically most middle class, white collar, even blue collar jobs will change. You're either outsourcing it or letting a computer or a robot do it. And we need to figure it out now. How do we adapt to it? How do we protect our workforce, help them adjust, and more importantly, help our companies maximize this, because this can also harm companies if we're not careful. So what are the typical targets for freelancing? And as I said, this is nothing new. It's only getting more prevalent now. But generally, any creative type of role, so graphic design, arts, media, is probably being done by a freelancer already. So when was the last time you had an in-house jazz band? Voila, no? They've always been doing that. Now the Hollywood model for movies, and then now web development. So for sure, if you have any type of freelancing or creative work, it's probably going to be prone to freelancing. So if you are an in-house creative something, you have to really make sure that you are adding value to your role. Otherwise, it could easily go to a freelancer. And if you're designing work that's creative in nature, like marketing, sometimes even sales, that can be prone to freelancing, as we've seen in the past. The second type of role, those that are highly technical. So I'm just going to use as an example the current demand for data scientists and engineers, but this applies equally to any role that's highly technical, because it's very hard to source. And if you are in recruitment, I'm sure you've struggled hiring highly specialized skills and tasks. And what's happening here is, because of the lack of supply, those people who are actually that skilled or are knowledgeable in these things, they find it easier to just hop around and offer their skills for sale, commoditize it na lang, rather than tie themselves to a company. And that can be, a phenomena that we might find it hard to adapt to if you're a traditional recruitment. And this extends also to semi-technical roles like administrative tasks, accounting, finance, anything that has a technical component. As the economy grows, there'll be a higher demand for them. The supply will not grow as fast, and therefore, freelancers can step in and take those jobs away. So we have to be careful. And then the third type of gig or role is basically anything that is collaborative. So if if your company works in terms of projects rather than a steady stream of tasks, like again the Hollywood model as an example, or development projects. If you're a computer development company, you build software, or if you're a project, you need to spin up an event. These are the types of gigs that are short-term in nature, very prone to freelancing, because it doesn't make sense anymore to hire a full-time staff if the demand for the labor will be seasonal. So these are the top three. There could be others, but we have to examine these because these are also the top three types of work that will be in demand in the fourth industrial revolution. Creative roles, technical roles, and generally any collaborative type of projects. So nowadays, again, this was not true during my college years, but today, with a smartphone, you can post your skills for sale, and vice versa. Employers who are also looking for those skills can look at certain platforms, and then if a match happens, voila, you have a gig. And later I'll be sharing how there are generally three, maybe just 3 or 4 ways that this is being done now. Just like the way Uber has revolutionized taxis and transportation, there is this thing, this digital thing affecting the nature of work and the gig economy in general. But this is like the way it works. Similar to Uber, you want to go to a destination, you put it in the phone, the driver is going around, agrees to get your ride, bam, a match happens. So the same thing. It's very platform centric. It's now going into the you're no longer looking at job descriptions as much as you're looking at specific skill sets, specific areas of expertise. There's actually a downstream impact to other areas like education, for instance. Back in the day, and to a certain extent still today, people take a course so that they can be knowledgeable in a certain field, so that they can take a certain job. And that's how schools have existed for centuries. But if now the emphasis will no longer be on roles, but just on specific skills, then why bother going to the traditional educational route? And that's why you have stuff like Coursera and online and YouTube being now the go-to place to learn anything by the millennials, as opposed to back in the day, you took a seminar or even a webinar for that matter. You probably will learn more in the 1 hour that I'm talking today than a one whole day seminar of traditional HR stuff. Well, hopefully. So here's an example of a digital platform. This used to be called Odesk. Now it's called Upwork. So this is just one approach. You basically post your CV online, and now you're for sale. And then if you have a particular project or you're in demand, you post a job online and you earmark specific skills. And then if a certain match happens, then you get to negotiate rates. So the way Upwork works is it also relies on a social rating system. So if you've done a past gig, you can ask your employers to rate your performance. So that's one way of getting credibility. Or second, you can also take Upwork certifications. So if you say you're knowledgeable in a certain subject, Upwork will test you, and then if you pass, you get that sort of badges. And that also helps you score gigs or get higher rates for that particular skill. So what Upwork has done is basically just digitize what we normally do in traditional HR anyway. You kind of want to test performance for recruitment. You want to certify people, you want to publish job descriptions, and people apply for jobs. So you just transplanted that into a digital platform. So this is like level 1. But this is not the only way it can work. But Upwork is quite popular. If you've never seen Upwork before, I suggest you take a look at it because it's really the leading place to find freelancers now. It also has a downside because you can game it. So if you've done an Upwork gig before, it's not common to have a particular disdain, sorry to say it, for people in India and Pakistan who tend to bid very low for a project. And then it's not to say that they can do the job better than you. Yeah, so usually what happens is they get the jobs first, and then they fail to do the job, and then you get a shot. So this is quite common. If this is sounding very alien to you, this is how it works in freelancing as well. You kind of have that dynamic of a market economy. It's happening in the Upwork economy. The second model, I don't know if you've heard of Patreon. Patreon is a site where its emphasis is on creators. So anyone who is a creative, so if you're a musician, you're a writer, a poet, you can also be a web developer, programmer, and basta you are creative and create stuff, you can create a Patreon account. And how do you monetize? Well, there are two types of people on Patreon. You have a creator and you have a patron. Creator creates stuff and patrons patronize the creators. So if you're a creator and the stuff you want is attracting a following, you can have fans monetize your work. They can either pay you per creation. So if you're a musician, you get paid per piece of music that you post. If you're a videographer, per video, a photographer, per photo. Or you can offer a monthly subscription to your fan base and you get the equivalent of a salary already. And depending, and on the patron side, you also decide which kinds of creators you want to patronize. Are you an arts patron? Are you a sciences patron? So on and so forth. And presumably, some of the patrons do this because they also need the work that they're patronizing. So maybe they use it for their own companies or their own work. But sometimes you have patrons who are just philanthropic. You know, no, I just want to contribute to the arts and I want to patronize these guys. So this is a very, I would say, avant-garde, non-traditional way of funding labor. And this is, I think, a sneak peek of what's going to happen in the fourth industrial revolution. The very definition of human resource goes beyond monetizing raw skills. You want to patronize people also because of what they stand for, what principles or what causes that they represent. So I'm not going to patronize a hacker who steals money, but I will patronize a hacker who actually helps protect websites. I know those. So the bare bones skills is computer science, but I'm patronizing people who will make the internet safer. I will patronize a blogger, for example, who stands for truth, as opposed to a blogger who spreads fake news. So this creates a whole new strata of monetization that didn't exist 5 to 10 years ago. So this is very interesting. I'm very excited about this. I actually opened the Patreon site myself. I haven't really gotten around to making it work. Too busy. But I'm so sure that I will probably be a very active patron because when my companies grow, I will be looking at this site as a source of not just talented people, but inspired people. And millennials love this stuff. I was in San Francisco last year. Everyone is talking about Patreon. So, have a look at it. Then there's the third type I want to share with you. This is a marketplace. So in a way, Upwork and Patreon are also marketplaces, but Envato takes it to a very commoditized level. So Envato is quite popular with web developers and web designers. Why? Because this market is a place where you can really sell really, really small pieces of work that people can put together and combine into bigger pieces of work. So for example, you want a theme for your website and you're not, you're struggling to find a good theme. Go to Envato and there's a place called Theme Forest. Just buy a theme for $10, 500 pesos. Or if you're a programmer and you can't seem to crack this particular process and you don't want to read, your computer science books anymore or study YouTube, maybe in Code Canyon you can find someone who posted a particularly creative piece of, engineering, and you just pay that person. And it also goes to graphics, photos, videos. So now it becomes closer to the Hollywood model. If you want, let's say your company is a retailer and you want to spin up a new website that features a 3D rendition of your product. Imagine how hard that would be if you were going to do it from scratch and hire people and conceptualize it. But maybe in Envato, 60 to 70% of the job is already done, and then you just need to hire one more freelancer to touch it up. So, again, this is another exciting area where the definition of work changes fundamentally, and it's no longer, it forces people to be very specific about what they're looking for and actually saves both the company and the employee a lot of hardship in negotiation. And for the creators or the freelancers, they get to monetize everything they do as long as they're doing good work. And for the employers or the people hiring, they get to save money because just as and when they need it, they go to Envato and pick it up. Again, this is kind of skewed towards the web design and development field, but there's no reason why this can't expand to other areas like sales, marketing, even admin, Excel sheets for sale. I mean, sure, all of your companies use some form of Excel sheets rather than creating one from scratch. Wouldn't it be cool to just get one for $10 and then use it and just modify it? So again, changes everything. The fourth model, and this is something I'm personally involved in, is the Meetup. I don't know if you're familiar with Meetup. If you're a Gen Xer like me, you probably are familiar with the term EB or the eyeball. So back in the forum days, you would join a forum that you like, a Pinoy Exchange, for instance, and then maybe you form these virtual online friendships, and then one day you say, you know what, we should meet each other. Let's have an EB. So Meetup.com has institutionalized this process where you basically set up EBs or meetups. And there are two types of people on Meetup. There are people who attend meetups and there are people who organize. And the interesting thing about meetups is when you sign up, you tell the Meetup website what you're interested in. It can be anything from Buddhism to vegetarianism to computer science to poetry. So that's your Meetup profile. And then if you set up a Meetup, you have to specify what kind of Meetup you're setting up. Oh, I'm setting up a Meetup for people who are interested in ketchup, whatever distinct interest you have. You can also have a more general Meetup group. And the magic is in the site itself. So the site has an automated machine learning algorithm that automatically starts matching people who are interested in what your Meetup is about to people, to those people who said they're interested in it. So I'm showing you an example of a Meetup group that I set up. So this is empirical proof. I founded this analytics freelancer group in May of this year because I also need access to people who are interested in analytics, both as employees and as collaborators, even clients. And with no paid marketing or paid headhunting whatsoever, I now have 299 members, completely automated. And on average, whenever I set up an event, and by the way, you're all free to join my event. It's coming up on December 11th. It's free of charge. We feed everyone there, talk about analytics. On average, about 30 to 50 people show up. And on average, maybe 5 to 10 of them are interested in a job, whether I posted a job or not. So I think this is the new job fair, low cost, machine intelligence helping you out. But I would say 99 out of 100 people in media or even HR, if I ask them, do you know Meetup.com? Probably no. So raise your hands if you know Meetup.com. I'm sure some of you, the younger people, you probably know that. See, only one person raised. So Lira, congratulations. You're part of the gig economy. Okay. Just some interesting statistics. So those are 4 approaches. So there's the Upwork model, which is traditional employment brought to a digital platform. There's the Patreon model, which is more playing to the purpose and the causes and creative people, and you patronize them like a patron would patronize the arts. There's the Envato model, which is commoditizing work into small bits, and then you sell that off. And then there's the Meetup model, which is finding people with common interests, and they join you, and then they're part of your cause and your belief. By the way, in the past 3 months, I also set up a freelancer group in Cebu and in Mindanao. And again, the magic is happening. I had the Meetup group in Cebu just 2 months ago, and now they have 100 members. And then I'm going to be setting up one in Mindanao, in Davao. I'm going there in December, and it's now close to 20. So, you can have a virtual network of job fairs every day, 24/7. Imagine how scalable that is if you wanted to build a network of freelancers or employees. By the way, you're also welcome to, if you want to talk in my freelance events and your company needs these kinds of people, I'm more than happy to host you guys if you're interested. Okay, so this is some statistics, no? This is just the Manila freelancer group. So I asked them several questions before they join. The most important ones are the following. Are you already freelancing? And the second is, are you interested? So a very interesting statistic, 14% of the people who joined are already freelancing. And that for me is interesting because the global average is 18%. So we're not that far away. And those who are interested in freelancing, if I look at this statistic, is about 66% of the total. So there's this 53% cross-section of the population who are not yet freelancing but are interested in freelancing. And I probably bet these are the people who are pissed at traffic every day, no? And that for me is a very startling, encouraging, and at the same time disturbing statistic. That means half of the people who are probably working in your company are already thinking of doing their own gig. Whether they do it or not remains to be seen. But this is why I think this is important for everyone. And there are just this 26% who didn't respond. There's probably still in the traffic. That's why they couldn't respond. But just think about it. No? Half of the people would take a gig if they could monetize it and if they could earn comfortably from it. Do they have to earn as much as a typical job? No. But if you have more time with your family, you have less headaches, you don't have to deal with a horrible boss, would you take that pay cut? Maybe. No? That's the interesting concept here. No? So the normal rules of engagement in HR no longer apply. People don't care if you're going to give them a signing bonus. If it means going through traffic for 4 hours every day, sa'yo na lang yung trabaho mo. So what does this mean, no? I think just to recap this, and again, this is a really long topic beyond what a webinar can do, but I just want to leave you 3 areas about the gig economy that you should take away. Number one, if there's already an option to do freelancing, that means traditional companies have to make sure that their employees are engaged and satisfied. Because now, especially with the millennial generation, the Gen Z generation, the Gen A generation, they'll just pack up and leave. You don't even have to give them their walking papers. And at the same time, you have some industries that are also contracting. Second bullet, salaries and bonuses, traditionally the most powerful tool, no longer attractive. Benefits, irrelevant, because if you're going to require them to spend 10 years in your company to earn, a housing loan, forget it, no? They're just going to stay home and do whatever work they like. Then the third, probably the most, I would say, near-term opportunity. Because this is happening already, and if we can't beat it, why not join it, no? So this also is a prompt for companies to consider creating hybrid workforces. So not just, for sure there are jobs that will always stay in the company. Hindi mo mawala lahat, no? But the ones that can go, like earlier I showed the value chain of analytics, if you can outsource them, why not? But that means transitioning into slightly modified HR model. So you're not just HR, you're also partly procurement as well, because you're going to deal with people the way you would normally deal with a supplier, and that can create a cultural clash or change. So those are just 3. There could be more implications. There's a question here, as a fresh graduate, how can I be engaged in HR-related careers in the future? Well, you know what? I'm sure there are opportunities for freelance HR professionals. I mean, it's something that's unheard of today, but if you're quite knowledgeable in how these new digital platforms work, I'm sure people would pay for your advice as a consultant. But again, if you want to contact me offline, we can talk about it. So anyway, that's the first half. If you have questions, just post it. I'm just going to power through the next half of the talk, where we're talking about AI. No? This is the second existential trend, which I think we should all be ready for. It's something that will affect certain industries first. But incidentally, just like freelancing, this thing has been around for longer than we think. So just because you never heard of the word AI or RPA before doesn't mean it hasn't been happening in your company. So I'll be explaining how this will affect us. So this thing is already in the news. If you haven't, been aware, since 2013, investments in the AI field has been increasing. Even locally, I think the most high-profile one was Dado Banatao. If you're not familiar, he's a Silicon Valley billionaire, Filipino, made his money in California selling motherboards, and now he's come back home to set up an AI incubator. He's working with AIM and certain other people, and they want to accelerate the adoption of AI in the Philippines. So don't believe for an instant that this is something that's only happening abroad. It's already happening in the Philippines today, and we'll probably start feeling it as early as next year. Um, so what does this mean? So automation and AI, you can actually talk about it in the same sentence. This is actually a big concern on the ground by BPOs, because BPOs have the perfect type of job that can be automated. I'll explain what that means. So there's certain types of roles also that are prone to automation. Just like earlier, there are certain types of roles that are prone to freelancing. So I just want to illustrate why this is happening. So if I ask you today, what is a computer? And you probably will say, well, a computer looks like that. No? You have a CPU, you have a monitor, you have a keyboard, it's small, or you have a laptop. But if you went back just 50 years, it was a room. No? If you were a computer, you were actually occupy a big room. And if you go back 50 years before that, a computer was a person. No, literally, you were called a computer because you computed. No? So this is interesting because today it's very alien to call someone a computer because we know it's a device. But what other types of people are also doing computing? You have accountants, you have admin, you have clerks, and won't, given the trend of what happened to the computer job in the next 50 years, would jobs like accounting become a machine? So, I mean, that's the thing. In fact, if you look around not too long ago, certain jobs don't really exist anymore. No? So I just want to run through a few of them. Number one, in the telcos, dati usong-uso yung concept of a switchboard operator. I don't know if you remember the era when you had to pick up the phone and ask the operator to connect you to the international hotline. No? Or you can say this is a collect call or a charge call. Really, really old people can remember this. So those guys are gone. Computers do all of that job. About 200 years ago, especially if you've seen the movie Frozen, there's an occupation called an ice cutter. Literally a person who cuts ice, because back in the day, you didn't have ice plants. You had to harvest ice from lakes. And you had people who were cutting ice from lakes and shipping them to whoever was going to consume them. And then very recently, I'm sure you can relate to this. I don't know how many of you remember what an encyclopedia is. So not the wall decoration, not the CD-ROM. I mean, a real honest-to-goodness source of knowledge. Before the internet, there was an encyclopedia. And during the encyclopedia era, there was an encyclopedia salesman. So I don't know if you do remember, these things cost expensive. So 50,000, 40,000 for a set of Britannica, Colliers. Very lucrative work, more lucrative than insurance. And then now it's dead. No one will sell encyclopedias anymore because you can get it for free online. But I remember when the first Wikipedia popped up in the 90s, people didn't trust it. I mean, the concept of a free encyclopedia was alien to everyone. So this is just a reminder that just because something sounds strange today doesn't mean it can't happen or it won't happen. In fact, that's a clue. If it doesn't make sense today, there's a higher chance that it will actually happen. Just like, 5 years ago, if you had asked someone, could you page a car using a phone and, agree on a rate before the destination happens, people will tell you it's like 100 reasons why you can't do it. Internet is bad, people don't have smartphones, etc., etc., etc. And now we have Uber and Grab. It's a fact of life. So this is preparation for things to come. The AI and RPA era will sound strange to a lot of companies today, but don't be complacent. Be updated, because this will affect work as we know it. So what the kinds of jobs are prone to automation? They're highly standardized and repetitive. They cost a lot, and they're also prone to technology. So what better job that satisfies this than the contact center worker? They have highly standardized and repetitive tasks. They cost a lot to maintain, and they're already highly dependent on technology. If you've ever worked in a BPO before, at least a typical BPO, it's a very digitized job. No? It's it's a job that depends on metrics. Everything is monitored. Your smoking breaks are monitored. Your lunch breaks are monitored. Your work is based on KPIs. Your increases are based on scorecards. So it doesn't take much to just replace the human being, and you have a fully automated job. And that's why BPOs are now thinking, what are we going to do when this happens? So I want to contrast kind of the traditional automation and the RPA that we're talking about. So automation is not new. So, and this thing was also popular in the 90s and even late 80s, because this is when Microsoft Office came about and all these popular computer tools came about, and the stuff that we used to do manually got moved to computers. So traditional automation, you still have human beings doing the work, pero they're augmented by technology. So you use tools to perform tasks. Employees are the ones bridging the gap between the tasks. And if you take away the human, the process can't happen. So that's the clue. If you're looking at traditional automation, the human being is important. In the RPA world, the end-to-end process can already be done fully by the robot. The bots are the ones that connect existing tools. And the only thing the humans will do is handle the exceptions. So in the contact center world, an example of this is the IVR, interactive voice response. If you're familiar with that, this is the menu that you go through when you dial into customer service of a bank, credit card. They give you options 1 to 5, and most of the tasks can actually be done fully on the IVR itself. But the moment you get into a menu where it can't be satisfied by the IVR, that's the only time a human being will pick up your call. So think of it that way. The IVR is RPA. They can already do end-to-end tasks, and then the human just does the the exceptions, and that can be massive in terms of removing all of the repetitive labor. Okay, so let's talk about how this works, no? And I'm gonna zero in on BPOs because they're the obvious, but I'm sure you can see how this relates to most companies. So why are BPOs using this? No? It's already a fact. They are in other countries, and sooner or later, the BPOs today here in the Philippines will do this. Number one, clients are looking for it. So it doesn't matter if your company isn't, your company's clients will be looking for it. Whether you're B2B or B2C, customers look for solutions that are automated. Just like we love Uber and Grab today versus the traditional taxi, companies will love it if you're able to give them an interface, you're able to give them a web form that can allow everything to be done quickly. So just by doing it, you become attractive in the market, and anything that makes your company attractive, you can bet your bosses will be interested to do it. Second, cost control. So it's already a proven fact. You can actually slice costs by as much as 25 to 50%. Certain tasks that used to require a human being to operate, this can already be done remotely. And that's interesting, no? When you're talking about a cost reduction of 50%, no matter the kind of ethical or legal or moral dilemmas it involves, you can be sure companies will be interested in it. Finance is still key. So just because of this, it's worth thinking about. If people get into RPA, we as HR just have to be careful that we're not unnecessarily just literally giving a gun in the hands of kids, because RPA can be a very, very, powerful tool, but in the wrong hands, it can also be abused. So those are two reasons. There are two more. Another is you want also smaller and higher performing workforces. If you are using bots, they're never on leave, they're never late, and if they make errors, you can correct the errors, and that's the last time you hear from those errors. Whereas a human being, you have to train them, you have to convince them, you have to engage them, you have to keep them happy, you have to feed them. And if you compare the maintenance in terms of TLC with a bot, there is no TLC needed. You just deploy them and they do it. Whereas in a human being, you have to invest heavily in all these creature comforts. So again, the cost argument is there, but it's really more about performance. A bot is quite predictable, while a human being is not. And then lastly, clients are now looking for the single source of truth. Now, this is just a euphemism to talk about data awareness. Now we have the Data Privacy Act being enforced. And guess what? No, it doesn't take the companies long to figure out that the biggest source of data privacy breaches are human beings. So if more and more of your processes are taken away from humans and they're put in the hands of bots, then there's a smaller chance of actually leaking that data, provided, of course, the bots are not hacked. No? But again, the hacking threat is actually, very ambiguous in the most part. No? And many rules, and bots are based on rules, will actually prevent people from unnecessarily accessing them. And if they do, there are so many logs that you can consult to enforce it. So in theory, from a security perspective, using bots is a more secure proposition. So again, it may not be far-fetched, might sound strange, but just because we're now doing data privacy might be a trigger for more companies to employ bots as opposed to humans. So what are the types of solutions? Just so you are aware, no? I know this is not too much of an HR issue, but just so you know that it doesn't need to be called a bot to be automation. The first level of automation is actually a macro. I don't know if you're using macros. You can use macros in Excel or Word. Any way that you can record a repetitive computer task, you're actually employing RPA. So, for example, if you copy paste stuff from a form into another form, you can actually record that, and then moving forward, you can replay it 100 times. The exact same action, computers will do that. So this is an example of what do you call this? Simple automation. Wait, I've got some messages here. Mitigation plans of local companies in technology. Mamaya, I might mention some, but in general, there are very few. So the fact that people are hearing this for the first time in a webinar like this is a clue that most companies are not aware. And then si Julia said she was just arriving at the Patreon slide. Don't worry, you'll have a copy of the prior slides later. I was talking about the gig economy later. If I finish the AI bit, I will go back to that. Okay, level 1 is macros. Level 2 is you can do macros also on a system level, not just on an application level. So usually this is IT doing it. So an example of a system level automation, if you work in a bank, is the batch run that happens in a bank at the end of the day. So all of the transactions are copied from a bank's core systems and moved into the data warehouse. And this is why ATMs go offline for a brief moment at midnight. But more than that, more and more companies are employing high-level automation across multiple systems, and this is really, really the trend nowadays. I don't know if any of you worked in DPI recently or are aware of what happened to their system. That's an example of a system-level automation glitch, no? Which involved a human being. But that just tells you that if that thing goes wrong, it affects millions of people immediately. So the fact that that thing actually happened should tell you already that companies like DPI are implementing, enterprise automation at a massive scale. It affects payroll, it affects people. Social media becomes the outlet for this. And DPI is just one of many banks, and banks is just one of many industries. So I think for the local front, most of them stop here. The next level is the bots, and the most impending one is the chatbot. The chatbot is an example of automation in contact centers. So rather than having a human being answer queries, you can have a computer. But it can be in the form of intelligent assistants, virtual agents. Some of them may not even sound human. They just do work on their own. And what makes bots different from macros is the bot can write its own rules. No? In other words, you don't have to program it. You just give it parameters now. Okay, make sure the system is always up, and these are the things you can do. The bot will know enough to look at various factors, and you don't have to direct the bot anymore. And what makes this possible is this term called machine learning. I don't want to get into too much detail, but machine learning just basically says the machine can adjust to changing conditions as opposed to a fixed rule, which will be the same thing again and again and again. Okay, so what kind of processes are already being automated? Para lang no? Kasi some processes are better than others, are easier to automate than others. The first one is finance. No? So account closure, opening, audit in a bank, foreign exchange, claims processing, and insurance. Because most financial processes are quite repetitive, very numerical, easily converted into an algorithm. Finance is one area where automation is happening a lot. And financial BPOs, JP Morgan Chase, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, so these banks have outsourced it to us in the Philippines. A lot of those processes have been automated already, and only the human component is being sent to the Philippines. So just think about that, no? And these banks, bank BPOs employ anywhere from 5 to 30,000 people on average. Last 5 minutes na raw. So I'll just flash all the four things: finance, HR, supply chain, IT. So these are all examples of processes that are quite easy to automate. Okay, I'm just going to skip to the part which is interesting, no? The most damning side of all. No? So this is an illustration. This came from Capgemini of the cost of an onshore employee and an offshore employee and a bot. So the onshore offshore thing is quite obvious, and this is what created the BPO industry. And that's why companies will continue to outsource. But if you can achieve an additional savings because of the bots effectively reduce a BPO's cost by 50%, you could probably do it, as opposed to paying 40K. So I mean, that's if there's one thing about this second half that you should take away, it's that the cost argument is tremendous. In terms of mitigation, the suggestions I have, if you are a company, rather than fighting it, just embrace the change and adjust your workforce accordingly. So that means staff development will be very important. Move people from repetitive tasks to high value tasks. You have to rework your processes for efficiency, because when your competitors start automating, you're going to get screwed in the market. And whether you like it or not, you're going to have to find ways of investing and understanding all these new technologies, because just like the internet 20 years ago was a revolutionary technology, now it's commonplace. It will also happen for RPA. If you are an individual, there's also a mirror image of what you should do. Be very conscious of your performance. Make sure that you're always, delivering uh, the best at your work, because the more valuable you are, the better the better it will be. You'll be one of the last people your company will replace. Make sure you upskill yourself, move away from repetitive tasks, try to learn more creative roles. It kind of works together. Maybe the answer to automation is become a freelancer and expand your options. Just don't get stuck in one field. And even fields that are quite traditional, like human resource, we'll see a change very, very soon, as these technologies impact the workplace. Okay, so I think that's all the time we have. I hope you found that interesting. I'll make the slides available to the organizers if you want a copy. And my contact details are here. If you want to talk to me offline, please do so. I think we should talk more about these things, both as individuals and as colleagues in HR. This is something that's very, very important, very close to my heart, and something that we all need to be quite mindful of. No? This is already the fourth industrial revolution that's happening. Okay, with that, thank you very much. And I turn you back to Melvin and the organizers.
All right, thank you so much, Doc. Any questions or clarifications from this afternoon's session? I guess we'll give you a minute or two to type in your questions, and I guess Doc can answer those any clarifications or concerns.
Yeah, I think Julia was asking what I was talking about before Patreon. I was just talking about Upwork and Envato. So, and the Meetup. So those are the four models. No? Upwork is traditional freelancing, so you just move everything online. Patreon, you're actually patronizing creators. In Envato, you're reducing all of the work into a commodity and you're selling the commodities. And in Meetup, you're creating common interest groups, and you can use that as a recruitment or a virtual job fair. No?
Yeah, and I guess again from Julia, slides or the copy of the slides will be given after the session. So no worries. You don't have to go back to the previous slide. Anyone else for any questions?
Estimate the investment for HR analytics. I think we'll have to talk offline on that. It can be many things. Do you want to just outsource it, or do you just want training, or do you want to invest in a platform? The platforms are cheaper than you think. No, I actually talked about this in the last PMAP webinar. So feel free to ping me an email and send you some ideas. There's actually some cloud-based HRIS solutions already. So if you're struggling with your HRIS, the traditional stuff like Oracle, Workday, and because those are quite complicated to implement. Guess what? There's already some cloud-based solutions now. But of course, the automatic objection is, oh, cloud, privacy, security, blah blah blah. So I guess that's the trade-off. No, do you want to be secure, 100%, but invest a lot of time and it will never get done, or you also want to be secure and get it done quickly? Because the misnomer is cloud is not secure, and in fact, it's the opposite. It's actually the in-house IT that's not secure because they're the ones that make mistakes. No? So just food for thought.
All right. So anyone else?
Mitigation plans. I forgot to mention that now. So just yesterday, I don't know if you caught this in the news, we launched the Analytics Association of the Philippines, of which I'm a founding member. And that's actually a massive plan to upskill 500,000 workers in data and analytics. So we're trying to get people, government, private sector, academia to cooperate. So if you're interested to hear more, about that, go to aap.ph. So message everyone about that, aap.ph. And feel free to send me an email as well. I can share you more about it. I think we're gonna also tackle the challenges of AI, because AI is inherently it's a data issue, but now it's affecting everything. So go to aap.ph for more info, or send me an email at dominic.ligot@cyrolytics.com, and I can point you in the right direction. Those who want to learn and commission HR analytics to their companies, any suggestions? I think the best suggestion is what exactly are you looking to apply? Because HR analytics is as varied as HR. Is it compensation related, recruitment related, performance management related? Because the solutions that affect one may not necessarily be the same thing for the others. So yun lang, be specific. Don't go for generic approaches. And again, don't settle for traditional approaches. There's already companies and the freelancers willing to tackle that. Is the government willing to embrace these kinds of changes in the near future? I have no idea. They don't seem to be talking about it. Even the Department of ICT doesn't seem to be talking about it. The Internet and Business Process Association, IBPAP, and the CICA are actually denying that there will be an impact. But on the ground, you can see they're really, really scared. No, so I think it's political. It's always political. People don't want to admit that there's a threat kasi ito na nga lang yung shining crown jewel natin outside of OFWs, but the threat is real. New technology key positions, how would this affect people under whose skills are not in the umbrella of key positions? I think those are the ones that are prone to automation. So everyone that you mentioned, cashiers, tellers, everyone who's not quote-unquote important, the decision to outsource or automate that will be easier, diba? Compared to the big bosses and so I think that's the biggest area of risk. But again, I'm just going to go back to my last slide. The biggest proof to that is if you're in a career that is prone to automation, consider expanding. So training is important. Development is important, and career development is important. So gone are the days where you can just do one thing forever. In fact, all of the jobs that have disappeared in the past were exactly like that. The switchboard operator was a repetitive job. The encyclopedia salesman was a repetitive job. The ice cutter was a repetitive job, and the contact center worker is a repetitive job. So, you know, history should be a guide on what we should do. Okay.
All right. Any more questions you want to ask, everyone?
By the way, this was not meant to be a gloom and doom scenario. I think this is an opportunity more than it is a risk. I guess it just starts with admitting that there is a change happening rather than denying it. No, but I'm sure the PMAP people are the first to embrace the change. We just have to get organized and
Correct.
okay for it.
Embrace change. Don't be afraid of change.
Yeah, not everybody will though. That's the way of the world. Diba? Yeah, and
Correct.
if you
Sad to
and if
say.
you find the millennials strange, what about the kids of the millennials? They're going to be even stranger. Employee engagement. Well, I mentioned that earlier. People get pissed getting to work already, and that's why freelancing is now an option. So if you're in the business of employee engagement, you now have to work doubly hard not to make sure your employees actually enjoy working in your company. But there are broader strategies also to consider, and it's not just working from home, no. Maybe choosing the location of your offices will be important. Gone are the automatic decisions of putting it in the central business district or in Makati or BGC. Nowadays you might want to opt for smaller shops, no, and then interlink them via network, no, and go where the workforce is. No? If majority of your workforce lives in southern Luzon, then maybe have a satellite office in Batangas, Cavite, Laguna, and make sure that they connect directly to your head office. It depends on the job then. No? So is this a hindrance for people to find growth, considering the mentality of a machine to do the job for them? It is a hindrance if you think of your work as the same thing you've been doing for the past 10 years. No? But if you look at history, work also changes. So I think it will be hardest for those who don't want to change what they do, who want to keep doing what they're doing. It'll be hard for them. But if you're the type who would want to expand, find an adjacent, career or vertical, then it favors the people who are more open to change rather than that. Is there a certification for attending this kind of program? I have no idea. Talk to PMAP. Do you have an upcoming seminar, hands-on HR analytics? I do actually, but maybe we'll advertise that somewhere else. Co-workers, especially older ones, are averse to automation. Any tips or materials to convert them? When you say the older ones, are you talking about the Gen Xers? Well, other than admitting finally that there's really a reality that's happening, I think their best chance is also find a niche that they're comfortable with. As I said, this thing is not gonna uh, favor everybody. Not everybody will make the change. Change management advice. One thing that people don't talk about a lot is the ethics of AI. I plan to give a talk on that sometime in February. There's going to be a conference on the ethics of AI and data, because everyone's so enamored with the technology, everyone's so enamored with the science and the engineering of it. But there are philosophical implications as well. So I think that's also something to put on the agenda. Not only are you investing in new technology, in new methodologies, you also have to invest in a new culture. So if you are a company that values people, I don't think you should stop valuing people, but you have to start to consider, what if half of the job is being done by robots? How will your people feel? Non-key positions, I think I think it will affect all kinds of positions. I mean, what's a non-key position? Like admin is a non-key position. Is that what you're saying? But back in the day, switchboard operator was a non-key position, and it's a massive position. So I wouldn't prematurely bucket. These roles are not important. Let's automate them. It might be the other way around. It might be the roles that are you value as very important. they're the first to go. Kasi you don't want to be gambling on that. No? So it depends on the company. Uh, yeah. Anyway, so I think that's all the time we have. Thanks for all the engagement. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Hopefully, I'll encounter you again in the next webinar. Melvs?
Right. So I guess that's it for this afternoon. And for our closing session, thank you, Doc, for joining, by the way. Thank you so much for the time.
Oh, no problem. Anyway, I have to drop off now. I have to. My car is going to get towed. So that's another thing about the fourth industrial revolution is parking is the new oil. No. Okay,
Yeah.
catch you all next time. Bye
Thank you
bye.
so much, Doc. All right. So to close the session, I'll be turning over you guys to our PMAP organizers for any announcements for future webinars or learning sessions. So Jazz or Jasper?